Hi, my name is Stephen Lee, and I am an attorney in Chicago who previously was a federal prosecutor and the senior counsel to the Chicago U.S. Attorney's Office's Healthcare Fraud Unit. And I'm very happy to be here today for part two of a two-part podcast looking at Operation Brace Yourself in a real-life case of how lawyers can help their clients through some very difficult circumstances. Now, in part one, we talked about Operation Brace Yourself, how companies responded, and two business owners, owner one and owner two, who decided to shut down their durable medical equipment businesses in 2020 after talking with a biller and a lawyer. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to owner one and owner two, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had already opened a criminal investigation targeting them. Now, I ultimately represented owner one, and I have with me today on the podcast a great attorney, Jonathan Meltz, represented owner two. Jonathan, can you introduce yourself?
Good to see you today. I represented owner two, and when I'm not representing owner two, I'm a senior attorney with the Chapman Law Group. We have 3 offices across the country in Florida, Michigan, and California, and I represent folks mostly in healthcare investigations, doctors who are charged with violations of the Controlled Substance Act and other white-collar crimes.
So we'll get through what Jonathan and I ended up doing to help owner one and owner two through this very difficult situation. But we want to start by going through some of the things that happen in a lot of these typical kind of investigations and some things so that people who are out there listening can kind of know how to navigate through some of these things maybe a little bit better. Basically, the first thing that happened as far as owner one and owner two were concerned, well, first of all, a lot happened. They had no idea. A lot of stuff was going on where the government was building up their investigation and clearly had ideas and thoughts about them, and they had no clue what was going on. The first time they heard anything about a criminal investigation to them was in the summer of 2021, when the FBI approached owner two and asked him some questions and served him a subpoena. He then got another lawyer, not us, who arranged for a proffer interview. Proffers come up a lot, and it's something that Jonathan and I dealt with in various capacities, and we want to talk a little bit about that for the general audience. Jonathan, can you explain what a proffer is?
You're right. Proffers do come up a lot, and I think they're some of the most important parts of any white-collar or fraud investigation. To define it, it's a meeting or an interview between somebody who's under investigation and federal agents and prosecutors. So what people have to understand, though, as you said, this investigation has been going on for a while. So the federal agents and the prosecutors have a ton of information. By the time they approach somebody and they say, we'd like you to give a proffer interview, it's like almost the exam where they know all the answers, right? And they're asking somebody to come in and answer questions. And the deck is already stacked against that person, meaning the person's going in not realizing how much information or how much investigation has been done. So here are some of the basic factors of it. The person has to be under oath to tell the truth, and therefore anything they say which could be a lie or a false statement could be held against them. The person may get a small amount or a limited amount of what we call immunity, but it doesn't give them full immunity to avoid prosecution for any crime. So I also or often call it the most important audition of somebody's life, right? I mean, we're not talking a play, we're not talking an actor, but it's an audition because there's a couple reasons that the proffer may happen. That the government is trying to determine if somebody's being truthful, whether they know information about a possible crime, or whether they are truly innocent. Or on the other hand, if the person could be a good witness, right, for the government. So it's an audition for that person's future. That's why it's so important, Stephen.
Before I bring a client in for a proffer, I spend a lot of time going through the material beforehand as much as I can to iron out things and make sure the proffer is as helpful for both sides as possible. Because there's no point in doing a proffer if the government ends up thinking that you're lying to them.
And I think, Stephen, it's important for people to note that we look at like 3 levels of involvement for somebody that the government wants to talk to, right? At the bottom, it's somebody who's just a witness. somebody who may have documents or may have some knowledge. They may know about the crime, but they don't have any criminal liability, right? They're just a witness. They're a puzzle piece in the government's overall puzzle. So those folks most times would benefit from counsel, but they're not within the scope of the government right now. It's the other two levels which are important. The next one being somebody who's a subject of an investigation. The government's not quite sure where they fit in yet, and that those folks could say something that puts them over the edge in a real negative light or a big problem. So they would benefit from having counsel. And then of course, the most significant role is somebody who's in a target, right? They received a target letter, or the government has told them or their attorneys, you're the target of the investigation. And those are the people who really have to be concerned about moving forward. I'm sure you're the same way, but sometimes we just say no, right? We're not going to bring our clients in for a proffer because as their attorney, we don't feel it's in their best interest. So there's certain situations where you have the right to say no. And based on what you and your attorney believe, that the proffer isn't something that's going to help you get the best possible result.
Quick break. If you're a healthcare provider or an entrepreneur involved in healthcare and have a legal problem, whether it's compliance, regulatory, DEA, criminal, or any number of legal problems, Chapman Law Group is here to help. Please visit us at chapmanlawgroup.com. Click the link below. Now back to the video.
In this case, owner 2 went in for a proffer. Unfortunately, it did not really help. Ultimately, the government basically heard owner 2 out, and they went ahead and indicted both guys the very next week on extensive charges. Owner 1 and owner 2 did not know about this. In fact, the people who were representing them at the time actually continued to provide information to the government for several weeks while owner 2 and owner 2 were already indicted, because the lawyers at the time thought the government was still keeping an open mind and actually continuing their investigation. The government then went ahead and the indictment was under seal, and they then went ahead and arrested or ordered them to surrender both owner and owner 2 right before Christmas of 2021. They then hired Jonathan and me.
And that's what I was going to say, Stephen. It's important to note that you and I didn't represent owner 1, owner 2 at that point. And a lot of times you talk about Monday morning quarterbacking and what would we have done, but you and I both think alike. We would prepare our clients as much as possible, hours, whatever it would take. But sometimes the government's already locked in, right? And it's almost, I hate to say it, but I will, it's almost a trap sometimes, right? The proffer can be, no matter what you say or do, you're not going to move them away from filing charges. So that goes into the consideration and the equation when you're deciding whether or not to go in for that interview, for that meeting. I think there's some general advice for doing a proffer, right, that I think we can kind of agree upon across the board. Is that one, you have to carefully consider and think about it. I look at almost 2 different tracks for a proffer. If you and your attorneys have already decided it's in your best interest to plead guilty, then a proffer is a lot of times a very important, significant meeting to attend, and something could help your case. Because the government may want to use you as a witness, and they need to gauge your credibility and see how you are, and that could help you in the end to get a better sentence. Ordinarily, I don't have a problem if you've already done all the work with your lawyer and you've decided that this is the right route. You already know you're going to plead guilty. But if you haven't decided that, that's where you have to proceed with the most caution as possible. So if you already are thinking about taking a case to trial, then I'm really hesitant about bringing somebody in, because if I don't have a good sense the government may back down and dismiss charges, I don't want to give the government a free look at our case and our defense and have the next 6, 8, 10 months to try and diminish, our defense for a case. And this is something I think that happened in our trial with owner 1 and 2. The proffer, right? I've never seen a proffer interview statement recorded, right? So what happened there is that since there's no recording of what owner 2 said, then the government brings in the agents who write a report based on their best recollection of what was said. A lot of times people hear something and interpret it differently, or they're physically writing down on a notebook in the interview. And that's not AI, that's not a transcription, That's not a recording. And 6 months, a year, 2 years later, all of a sudden that interview may come extremely important, and there's 2, if not more, versions of what was really said. And that can be really problematic in a case. So some of the other things you got to be careful about with a proffer is I would keep it limited. I would make sure that your attorney is in there taking notes. So, to have a witness as to what was said, and maybe sometimes you insist on a recording or a transcript, and then no side can claim something was or was not said.
So unfortunately, the proffer here, owner two's proffer, it clearly did not change the government's view of these guys. And they went ahead and charged owner one and owner two.
Thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked it, please hit that like button. It helps the channel. It tells YouTube to show this video to more awesome people like you. Hit that subscribe button and the little bell to the right so that you get notifications of more upcoming videos.